we've been running out of time, so I'm hopping into the monologue. David, you can bring yourself up, but here's what we're doing today, okay? First off, I want to welcome back everybody to another episode of South Star Classroom, where we break down the biggest issues in education, how they impact our communities. I'm Dr. Cole. That's Omar. David is downstairs, but he should be coming up into the main window soon. There he goes. Now, I want to talk about something that's been on the rise for a while and has kind of been a little hard to pin down. And I would say, especially in the Black community, just around information. I can't speak to other ones, but homeschooling and the rise. So for decades, homeschooling was seen as a niche choice, often associated with religious families or alternative education advocates. But in recent years, particularly since the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen an explosion in the number of families opting out of traditional schooling. Black and brown families in particular are leading the charge, homeschooling at higher rates than ever before. So why is this happening? What does it mean for the future of public education? And what, most importantly, what can we learn from families that's making this shift? And we'll dive into these reasons behind the rise, the challenges and successes of homeschooling, and what this movement says about the state of education today. Now, because I run a lot of stuff and I'm terrible at marketing, I am making sure I do this today. I recently wrote an article about this very topic where I explore how homeschooling has become one of the most agentic practices a family can actually take on, and it can reshape the future of education for Black and brown communities if we actually really grab it. If you want to read more, you can check it out on my Substack, and I will make sure in the midst of the conversation, I will post it. But I have my brothers, Omar and David here. Jubilee is joining us soon. Fellas, how are you doing? Omar, let's start with you, brother. And David, hold down the fort. I need to get my coffee.
Yeah, man, get that coffee, brother. David, good to see you, brother. Dude, I'm doing all right, man. I'm like coming off of some weird sickness, some sinus thing that I got. So apologies for my cough. I've been dealing with this for like a week and a half. And then it does not help that El Paso looks like the book Dune right now, where the sandstorms are so high. I think a Bedouin from Star Wars is gonna come and kidnap me. You know, those like Doom Doom guys, they're walking around, they like stealing shit from machinery from Star Wars in the desert. They're gonna come take me, David. That is if ICE doesn't come and take me first, good sir. But how are you today, brother? You looking all right?
Yeah, good. I'm good, man. Yeah. Interesting. Is that normal weather for this time of the year?
No, it's normal for
everything's
April.
Yeah, it's crazy. We're good. Just been busy. Got barely made it today, but I'm glad to be here. And let's see what's going on. We just mapped out the next 2 months of the show. A little behind the scenes information, and
People
I think
love
our
the behind
next
the scenes.
Yeah, I think the next push is going to be getting to 200. So look out for that, if you can believe that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yep. And again, there's always. I mean, we could have talked about a number of topics today. We could have talked about the NAEP scores, the new national test scores that just came out. We could have talked about the Super Bowl halftime show.
Good.
We could have talked, but I'm just saying there's so much stuff that we can talk about in general, like what, things that are happening in the world, the Trump administration. I'm glad to be talking about homeschooling today, but point being is like the world brings us our content. And so, we're not stuck on, particular like education specific topics, but we can tie a number of things back to education in Black and brown communities. So that's why I enjoy being part of the show.
That's what's up, man. Well, we can definitely get some of that stuff in here. I'm still working on NAEP. That's why I was already working on this homeschooling thing when I was like, what are we talking about? NAEP, I should have ready personally and my article out by next week, by the next time we're back together, but it's not my topic next week. But nah, man, I'm good. I'm tired, but this is a good thing. I think everybody's kind of tired right now, and everybody I know is kind of sick. My assistant is really sick too, and I told her to we had a check-in, and she was, I'm coming this. I'm like, man, go get better. Like you're good. So feel better, Omar. Yeah, the Super Bowl did happen. The halftime show happened. I'm kind of like, I've just been hearing so much about it. Like I watched it. I've been hearing about it. The game was kind of lackluster. So I mean, I'm from Oakland, so the California aspect of it all with Kendrick was cool. I don't know if I'm as over the moon as everybody is on it. Like I'm not deciphering everything. I thought he did well. I thought it was fine. Like, but I'm saying it's just such a big. It's just been everywhere that it didn't even enter my mind to discuss it today. So, but that's just me. But just real quick before we get into like the big heady questions, just when y'all are education leaders, a lot of this stuff is kind of nebulous to people. I'm just wanting to know who you are in your positions, and coming to you first, David, you're on deck. Is just how do you explain homeschooling to people, or people that might ask you about it, whether they are super psyched about it or afraid of it, or think it's only for crazy or rich people? Like, David, how do you break that down for people?
Well, I would say I would look back at a timeline, and I would remind people that modern, like what we have today in terms of modern compulsory education systems, which means like you have to attend school if you're school age, are not that old. It's still relatively a new thing. Our current system of education, bringing people together to a building to go through a number of different courses and transitions and curriculum, sitting in rows and desks and chairs. I mean, that goes back 100 years, right? Mm-hmm. And that's in the larger span of history. That's a drop in the bucket. And so I would say, if you look at the the development of human society and civilization, like we've been schooling our children in our communities for probably, I don't know, 95% of the timeline, if not more, that we can, much longer actually. So, this whole thing that we call public education, or even private school education, where students go to a building, a brick and mortar building, and they're taught by other people, it's still relatively a new thing.
Right.
So, but when we think about homeschooling, we definitely get, I've had to break through some of this bias myself. We tend to think of, number one, we think of like white students, right? Mm-hmm. Think of like barefoot white kids running around in a forest somewhere. Have autism, right? And I mean, it's just,
I mean, that's what it was in Mean Girls, right? She was like homeschooled, but they were like in the African safari.
Yeah, it's like it's the perception versus the reality. And I think the reality now is that, and I don't want to get ahead of the next question, but I think for me, homeschooling is about it's about equity. Mm-hmm. Equity of access, right? It requires a certain level of privilege to be able to homeschool your children. It means you have to have time, you have to have knowledge, expertise. It's not a free for all, but I think it's an interesting time. And I don't want to get into the next questions. I think there's definitely a place for homeschooling. I think all communities should be empowered to access homeschooling if that's something that they want to do for their families. Mm-hmm. And homeschooling is not just for white kids and special education students. It should be for all students, right? And so that's my quick take on it.
That's what's up. Oh, if when people, you're a school leader, maybe somebody in the community has some thoughts either way about homeschooling, and you kind of got to break it down. Just what's your initial thoughts? I know y'all know what the first question is, so with that understanding, like, how do you just explain that to somebody that may not have a good understanding?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. So I deal with this a lot because I have a lot of parents who come to me and just simply say, we were going to homeschool. and
Mm.
you're the only school that we've decided would be an appropriate shift for our kids. And I dive into that question. So I asked them, like, what is it about our school that means something to you in terms of your experience with homeschooling? So it breaks down pretty simply. What is homeschooling? So for our audience, you have a lot of people that basically don't like the public school system and may not be able to afford or like the private school system. So what they
Mhm.
say to themselves, and David brings up a really good point, because there is a sense of privilege, because if you can stay at home with your kid and ensure that they're getting schooled as opposed to having to work, which many of my parents have to do, um, and or dealing with other family situations, like you may be the matriarch and having to like take care of a bunch of other children. um, Homeschool becomes a privilege of being able to focus in and tend to the needs of your child in a very specialized way that I think, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, right? I don't really have a lot of evidence for this, just is more holistic.
Mhm.
So a parent being like, look, this isn't just about learning your ABCs and your one, two, threes. This is about developing you into a person that can navigate the world. So that connects with parents coming up to me and me asking, what is it about our school that has made this very large scale decision that you're going to trust us with your kids when you are going to homeschool? And the answers are always the same. It's three things. One,
Well,
small.
you're answering the next question. So let me just go
Okay.
ahead and just you're good, you're good. Let me just go ahead and just put it there. And you just stay on deck. Like, you started to kind of go into it. Like, why do you think it's
Yeah.
become such a positive alternative, especially for Black and brown people? So
Yeah. And
there
I've
you go.
got something to share about that. So I'll continue and then I'll kind of go back to something I want to share in a book I'm currently reading. Their statement is simple. It's like, look, one, it's small. So this is going to be a easier transition for our kids, because in their mind, going to a 5,000 person high school or a multi-thousand person middle school, it's pretty overwhelming when the kids have been at home. But that can't be the reason alone that they're sending them with us. The biggest reason is that they've really looked into our curriculum and they're like, there's something about what you're trying to do, Omar, where you care immensely about shaping kids' minds and hearts in a way where they're becoming, we have it in the name El Paso Leadership Academy, but leadership is so much about, and it's a term that I like to use in our mission statement, self-actualization. How do you learn who you are and how to navigate the complexity of the world and its very complicated structures? So for our parents who homeschool, they're like, we want more than just some school who's going to ignore our kids or just teach to a test. You've got this home environment in a school where you care immensely about the development of a child holistically in a way that actually is very positive and praising. So I want to read something really quickly, real quick. I'm reading this book for a book club that I just joined. It's badass, called Ratchetdemic. I mean, the name's crazy. It's awesome.
Yeah,
Gives
Chris's
a
book.
very different, very. Have you read it, Charles? It's pretty damn good.
I know Chris.
Yeah.
Chris actually helped me get through my doctoral program, but
Oh
yeah,
yeah, dude. Yeah,
I'm
Christopher
familiar
Ebding.
with it. Mm-hmm.
So he makes this statement, and I want to read it real
Let me say,
quick.
I don't know. We're not friends like that, but we are cordial. We say hi to each other. Let me be
All
clear.
right, right on. Well, that's
People get
badass.
upset when you say that, though. Like, we don't go get tea and crumpets, but we definitely
Go
know.
get yourself some tea and crumpets and shit, man.
He's a
It's
cool
good
dude.
for you. Come on, man. So this in the book, he says our schools, particularly for Black children, function to fill the mind, police the body, and cast away the spirit. It's a pretty profound statement. Our schools, particularly for Black children, function to fill the mind, police the body, and cast away the spirit. What he's essentially saying is that the public school system is deteriorating the ability for Black and brown children to be Black and brown. There's a lot of code switching that needs to happen for Black and brown kids to function in schools and in this white system. It's a question I'll bring up later. And he says, achieving this state of consciousness, this ratchet ideology, right? Because he redefines ratchet into basically like being your true authentic self. Achieving this state of consciousness is the true mark of being educated. And both getting to that point and helping youth to get to that point are the chief responsibilities of the educator. You know, I love this because I think this is what homeschool is all about. I think people are choosing to get out of the system because they're seeing their kids just being absolutely deteriorated. Their imagination being told is irresponsible or inappropriate. I mean, one of my favorite quotes when I was teaching at a middle school outside of Austin, when I was trying to teach students responsibility, the idea of just like accepting responsibility for their own actions, a very small part of self-actualization was like, Omar, we don't teach you to teach or we don't pay you to teach responsibility. We don't do that here. We teach to this test. And this is what we're teaching. This is our sole responsibility. And that is why, like, I got mocked for trying to start my own fantasy school because I felt like it was a necessary component of holistically developing children's spirit, their mind, their soul, to empower themselves, to understand themselves, to celebrate themselves for all that they are. That is an essential hallmark for me of education. And I had to start my own school district to do it. So imagine all these other parents who are sitting here being like, what's the alternative? This is why I think you're seeing a meteoric rise in homeschooling, because there is no other alternative for so many of our parents.
Well, and people wanted to know what concoction you put in your cup too to make sure you're getting better, brother. It's a lot of people trying to take care of you in the comments. So thank you, Nicole. David, what about you, man? Like, why do you think it's just become, so prominent and such a popular alternative in our communities? Muted.
Yeah, I think looking at some of the comments that are coming in here, it looks like a fair number of our viewers have experienced homeschool. Looks like for different reasons, but again, I think homeschooling has obviously always existed. I think prior to the pandemic, probably not well documented, right? Well studied. I think as a result of the pandemic, many parents, all different backgrounds of parents, got to witness and experience what education looked like, what instruction looked like, even though it was through a screen. I understand that, but I think a lot of parents realize that two things. In many cases, young people were happier because they got to do school and learning in an environment that was free from bullying and from violence, and in many times racism and repression, right? You talked about that conformity piece, not having to go to school to conform to another, I wouldn't even say the dominant culture, but just to the the controlling culture, right? We have to like gravitate towards whiteness in many cases to survive, right? As young people, and when we're very young, we don't even understand it. And I think so. That's number one. I think for many young people, there was and they experienced not having to go through those things. And I think number two, many parents, more parents started paying attention to actual academics and rigor of instruction. I mean, I can't tell you how many countless times I sat by. I ran a pod during the pandemic of family and community young people. So I got to experience everything from second grade instruction up to sixth grade instruction. And, depending on the teacher, depending on the school, there was so much variety around rigor and expectations. and that was like mind-blowing to me. So I also got to experience, a lot of other interesting things coming through the computer. Now I'm talking about my own experience where one of my son's teachers, she was a younger white woman, and she kept correcting him based on how he identified, right? Like, he's like, I'm Mexican American, I'm Chicano, and she's like, you are Latinx. And I told the story, man. I almost broke the Chromebook, and I couldn't believe it. And I'm like, how much of this stuff happens like when we're not around, right? Assuming, teachers assuming that students need to express themselves and communicate and identify in a particular way that suits the narrative of the day, right? And so I became alarmed in like guarding like what instruction looks like, what do the conversations look like. And then number 3 is, I think a lot of parents started to better understand that their children were falling behind, probably falling behind before the pandemic, and during the pandemic, academically, reading and math continued to fall behind. And based on the recent NAEP scores, we know that students continue to fall behind. So I think all those things created, and I think a lot of parents realize that like, oh, we can do it at home. It doesn't necessarily have to be me with my children in my home. It can be me with kids in the community, or another parent, or you can share it, So people got creative.
We can split up subjects, like
exactly. And I think a lot of that creativity, that mindset of like, let's take care of our own, has I don't think it has continued post-pandemic. And now we're hearing more stories of homeschooling in urban, suburban, rural, Black and brown communities.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. I think very similar to you guys too. Like, one, to steal from Omar, this book right here, this Education of Blacks in the South, I talk about it a lot. I reference it a lot. And just, when you are not able to educate yourself or educate your kids, or somebody could lose an appendage, Black or white, for teaching a Black person how to read, I think just valuing how special and important it is to be able to educate yourself. But I honestly, I think I agree with everything y'all said. I think it's just very simple, man. I think people saw that they could, especially during the pandemic, I don't think many parents were impressed with what they saw. And I think
they were horrified with what they saw. And
I think I was being nice. I was being nice with it, right? Like, I think people, hey, Jude,
horrified.
I think people were like, well, hell, we can do this. We can do better here. You know what I'm saying? Like, wait, such and such got a degree on that. Okay, such and such got a degree on this. And I think even with the proliferation of like all these homeschooling and pod like accoutrement, right? Things to help you, things where you can kind of build this stuff out. They kind of teach you. I think that, people have embraced it. I think people, and then when you start to see what people were fighting for on the left and the right of what should be in education and what shouldn't be, I think there's a lot of people in the middle of that's like, I don't want my kid a part of none of this stuff, I would just say, called on my grandmother, and I'm a, let Jude kind of jump in after this. That's the question there at the bottom, Jude. Like, my grandmother is like, look, people used to come to our door all the time, ask for sugar, ask for coffee, ask for whatever to go cook. And then I would have to go pick up things from these people's homes. Or like, I remember getting yelled at or fussed at by a neighbor, and my grandmother was basically like, did you discipline him? Like, with the expectation that he should have disciplined me, right? Like, but this village mentality that I grew up with when I was poor, money don't always fix everything. And I think that when we were poor and we had to depend on our community, that's when we learned how to share the most and be a community. Well, I think we're academically and educationally poor right now. And I think that you have to reintroduce this village mentality. And I think that's why homeschooling for us specifically has started to kind of rise up, because you kind of broke through the barrier that only rich people do it. You kind of broke through the barrier that only super religious people do it. And, we asked this question in the beginning. I was what? Young, like 19 or 20, or maybe early 20s when Mean Girls came out, and that was the depiction, right? The homeschool kid was always seen as weird, not socialized. And I think that the more that started to get cracked, I think people were like, I think I'm gonna rock with this homeschooling thing. Welcome now, Miss Jube. How are you?
I am doing better.
Well, that's good. Well, welcome. We throwing you right into the fire.
Let's do it.
Question is general. I think you got a strong opinion on this, regardless of what you heard or not. Why do you think homeschooling just has taken off with Black and brown families, especially post-pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, safety, identity, and connection to your own community. And I'm over here thinking, like, as a people, I really think we need to reflect on like what we do when times are good or when we feel like we are accepted or represented, in society in these key places, because I think we start to shift and move away from some really core things that made us who we are as a community, as a people, as Black and brown people. And so that's like my first, thought, right? Like homeschooling should always be a thing, right? Whether it's that it's a full day and you're literally like teaching curriculum, all of that, or whether that you take your family in the morning, your kids, your 4 and no more, and you pour into them, right? And lay that foundation before they ever go out into the world. And I think like stuff like that should just always exist. And a few weeks back, I was watching, I think it was All Eyes on Me, the Tupac movie. I know there's a couple out. And I just was so moved by how his mother just laid that foundation, right? And it's just like, she was unapologetically Black, right? As was Tupac. And she taught him these things. She gave him the books to read and schooled him before he was ever in school, right? And so whatever he was learning in school, right, at least he had some kind of playbook, right, to be able to compare it to or to understand, wait, this is different, or I'm aligned with this, or I'm not. And so I think as a people, like homeschooling should just be a foundation of what we do. And I'm not talking about necessarily only in the traditional sense of homeschooling. I'm talking about if we can lay the foundation of the A, B's, and C's, if we can lay the foundation of, hey, this is who we are as a people. Here are the people who came before you, who laid down this groundwork, the people who invented this, the great thinkers and the theologians and philosophers. And look, some people, you dark skin, baby. Oh, some people not going to like that. They intimidated. They don't think you smart. They don't think you beautiful. But let me tell you something, you beautiful. That's what I'm saying. Homeschooling for Black and brown people, I feel like that's where it begins. And whether or not society accepts us, diversifies, has DEI, does not, cares about equity, does not, that we still stand 10 toes down and say, no, we are going to indoctrinate our own babies. We are going to pour into our own children before they ever go out into the world and give them as much information as possible and as strong as a foundation as possible outside of traditional schooling.
I got you. So before I go into a different topic,
came in hot.
Good. I'm saying, man.
I like it, man. She came in real hot, but with like big ass opinions, and I like it.
She had to show the nails off too. Her nails look nice, like they just got done. You know what I'm saying? I mean, she showed them like 4 times. She did the heart. She was like,
you know what?
Homeschool.
Leave me alone, Charles.
We're just happy you here.
I talk with my hands, you know that.
It's all good. The nails look great. I'm not mad at you.
Thank you.
And shout out to Miss Toya, who I got to host a bunch of her grandmothers and other people. I went and did a talk on one of these, one of my studies, but we talk about these kind of things. And, I think here's the other thing. I think we have to break through this notion of these grandmothers or parents not feeling worthy. And I think that's what happened during COVID. I think there's always been this veil, kind of like, well, I'm just this, I can't do that. And I'm telling you, I got so many stories from people from so many different races that was like, I listened in, like the first few days, it sounded fine because they knew they was being watched, but can't nobody hold up a facade for that long. They were like around week 3 and 4, like those teaching practices, or she was like, how do you do handouts over Zoom, right? Like, I think parents were like, I can do better than this, or we can get something better than this, or people that said that you shouldn't be together, those people with money started to pay for their own clusters and things like that. So
Yeah,
I just thought it was interesting, man. Go ahead,
I got two more quick things. One of them, they're both, well, one of them's technical and one of them is more on the social kind of spiritual side. I think regardless of where, I think as time has gone by, we are slowly starting to realize that our schools were closed for too long, right? During COVID, and the impact that had on children. I would say the fear that placed on families, has not gone away. And so I think, the one kind of school that you can never shut down is a homeschool, right? Because it's in your home. But I will tell you, they'll figure it out. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think, even when we were looking for a middle school and now we're in a new high school, we had the option of choosing charter schools. We could have homeschooled, but we had the option of choosing charter schools and private schools, but we chose, and this is kind of where it's counterintuitive, but not really. We chose the big comprehensive district middle school and the big comprehensive district high school. And one of the reasons that we did, and part of this was because of my encouraging, was like, they're not going to close for better or for worse. Like charter schools get shut down, right? We're seeing that right now in Oakland. And so like, I have this fear, like I'm going to set my kid up in school. And at some point, you know what it's like to try and find a new school, in between when you're in the 6th through 8th or you're in the 9th through 12th, it's not easy, man. And so that was one of our reasons. And I think the second one, which is more technical, is, I've always been a big proponent of technology and online learning. We used to call it blended learning. Mm-hmm. But, think about the tools that were developed. And then when COVID came, the proliferation of online tools. So parents now have access, young people have access to so much information now. It doesn't replace the role of the actual teacher, but in terms of content, any kind of content, is pretty much there. A lot of it's vetted. We have, there's different, more specific types of online platforms that focus on Mexican-American history or African-American history. I forgot the project that what's the former superintendent of DC? What's her name?
Kaya. Yeah.
What was that operation that she was running? I don't know if it's still running, but it focused on like Black history, right?
Okay.
You mean reconstruction.us?
Yeah, I think that,
it's a tool where you can, as a parent, you can use this stuff at home. They even have a spades class. So they got everything from like trigonometry to spades,
So I think the tools to access the content they're there now, and it's easy for people to access. I think that also makes homeschooling a lot easier for a lot of families, that they don't have to generate or create curriculum.
Man, go ahead. I know our brother, and I just want to show him some love, man, because he is ailing over there. Omar, you a trooper, man. And also for people that did not peep, Omar got the dopest hoodie on right now. See, you gotta be drenched in culture to understand the Show Enough Kiss My Converse hoodie. You feel me? I could not let you be on this show, coughing and all, without highlighting that. I need to know. Don't tell me with everybody. I need to know where you got it from, so I can. Everybody can have it. I just wanted to make sure I can get it. But
Show enough.
I'm not the prettiest.
Show enough.
This is Show Enough's row.
But we gonna get you out of here early, man. So why don't you just any other thoughts around this, man? Because you struggling, but bro, we don't need you to.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you. Yeah, I'm hurting today. A couple things. One, my boy Chris Arlene from Philadelphia sent this to me, and the best thing was he sent it to me anonymously. So I got this thing, and I was like, "Yo, man, who the hell knows me well enough to know my
anybody that watches this damn show knows
unmitigated love for Show Enough, who, by the way, was a very serious actor." And just a quick aside, Ty Matt, who was the star of that movie, who was Bruce Leroy, actually came to El Paso at well, I'll think of that movie theater in a second. The Alamo Draft
The
House.
movie is The Last Dragon. For those
The
that
Last
don't
Dragon.
know, yes,
The best damn movie, man. And he was basically saying that they had to do multiple takes because the Shogun of Harlem, who's a brilliant actor, was so funny and was so over the top that everyone just kept cracking up during all the takes that they had to take multiple takes. So I'm out there looking for this like B-reel or like the blooper reel for this movie because I need to see it, because I need to see all of his like improv jokes. But just kind of on the last, I have a couple of parting thoughts. And to answer the question about advantages and disadvantages, it's weird. I've been thinking about this a lot, and maybe because I'm reading this book, right, that this has just been on my mind. And I got a question that I'd love to ask the audience, that I'd love to ask you all in conjunction of this question that's been on my mind, which is like, I thought about, well, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of homeschools? And the advantage clearly is that there's this intrinsic sense of developing a child in terms of what is important to you and how are you developing a child with a sociological understanding of a world that they're going out into, right? So like Tita Yanar, my mom, a hell of an educator, had a very specific philosophy. And it's like, look, kid, like you are living in a white society. That is the predominant culture. And going out there and understanding how the society speaks and functions and works is to your advantage of being in these schools. Because what we do is we call it code switching. So everyone on this show in our audience probably knows exactly what code switching is. But if you're unfamiliar, code switching is a practice that we all do where we change our patterns of speech and our mannerisms depending on who the audience is. So you may hear very eloquent Omar Yana, but like I get around my cousins and all of a sudden my voice starts becoming a little like this, and it starts going a little slower and you start having a voice inflection. And it was funny because I was watching a video with Mario Lopez recently where he was talking about code switching. He's like, dude, I can't do that voice on Access Hollywood. I've got to be this pristine Mario Lopez. I can't be like hanging out in Vario Mario Lopez. Or, dude, I get around my Black friends as a total, like, I get louder. I start quoting shit that no one understands in the white community because they never seen an episode of Soul Train. They never seen In Living Color. They never even saw House Party. Fucking House Party, man. Everyone needs to go out and see House Party. Like, that's a code switch because like I gravitate towards Black culture in a way that is one of admiration and adoration, where I think so many people look at Black culture with a misunderstanding and fear, which really pisses me off, which is an advantage of homeschooling, is to understand like your culture is powerful and it's beautiful and you should accept it and love it, not get rid of it. So I'm at this like very interesting stage where it's like code switching is beneficial, but I got to ask the question, do you think white people need to code switch?
Well, I mean, I actually have a thought on this. When I was doing my dissertation, there was a part of it where code switching was in there, and I actually built like a different term in it. I think a lot of people.
What'd you call it? What'd you call it? You're a doctor.
I'll bring it back up. I kind of I cut it out towards the end, but basically what my thing was around, if you're doing it in a strategic way and you're in control of it, like you're in control of why you're doing it, then use it as a strategy. If you're doing it out of like this thing, this deep-seated, like you don't feel like you're enough or good enough, then cut that shit out. Because one of those is code switching, and the other one is soul sucking, and I don't like that. But I understand being smart when you're in this place is different than when you're in that place, and I think that we have to like. I think sometimes we could be pretty flippant in how we tell young people to be when we wouldn't do those things and we set them up for failure, but also you know, there's a way to be authentic and professional. So it's a lot more complicated. It's going to take us off this whole homeschooling joint, but I think I got strong thoughts about it. So I'm going to land that plane right there.
Sounds like an
I
episode
like it.
of code switching.
Yes.
Oh,
The next time I can't think of a topic.
yeah, I'll do that one. I'll do that one next time I host, man. I'll write that down. That's actually a good ass idea.
Yeah, but you know, but David, just coming to you, man, like, and you definitely feel free to answer the code switching question as well, but just some advantages and disadvantages that you feel are associated with homeschooling.
I'll answer the first question quickly. I don't think I want white people to code switch. I think I'm good on that. But the
Can't do it
second,
all the time.
I'm
but-
not saying should they, because I don't think they need to be acting like us. And I want to clarify, I actually don't think that we should have to code switch. I want to be as loud and as brash and as Lebanese and Mexican as I want to be. This is just a weird coping mechanism, and Doc put it really well. Is it strategic or is it soul sucking? But yeah, I don't need those white people like coming in and starting to do their weird ass shit around me. That's
well,
just
I think they do
freaky.
code switch in front of you. If you're not hearing them, they're not talking anyway. I think everybody does to a degree. Listen, I am somewhat code switching now. If the cameras are not on, my conversation with y'all is just different because we have personal relationships. We know each other. Like it's some things I would say to y'all like between us because you don't need the context for it. Versus when we got this camera on and people are watching us and clipping it. Right. I also just learned that there are a few PDs across the country that have used some of our videos in their PDs. So kudos there. Back to David. Yeah.
nice. Okay, are we doing question number 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think
advantages, disadvantages.
Yeah, I think the advantages are many. I think for me, the advantages that kind of stick out are, you know, the ability to create a culturally affirming space for young people, right? Which we know we don't get in our schools. That was my experience of not getting that. I didn't get culturally affirming education until I hit college, right? Until I was able to take my first course on the introduction to Chicano studies. I was like, I didn't even know this literature existed. And this is way back when there wasn't a lot of literature. But so I think there's the culturally affirming piece for sure. And then, you know, what we can control also is, and it's related, are just the inequities and racism that young people of color have to face every day. You know, especially in systems that have, you know, I think like some of the numbers coming out of like Philadelphia, like what percentage of teachers are white? Like 90, you know, something like that in the Philadelphia school system. Yeah, it's insane. So you think about like all of the maneuvering that young people have to do, right, to just survive in the system when you have that great mismatch. So I think that's another, I think flexibility and autonomy, you know, are very important too. I think challenges when it comes to, I mean, there's a couple of challenges. I think I would say like resources, right? Learning resources. You might not have access to particular things, but then, you know, the world is can be your classroom if you can access it. So tied to that is, you know, how I think, especially as you get into the older grades, like, you know, how well equipped are parents to actually, you know, do some of the higher level high school and even middle school instruction, right? Thinking about immigrant communities, thinking about some of the technical pieces around math and science and, you know, all the subjects, right? That can be a big learning curve. I think the other, you know, the bigger thing for me when I think of homeschooling, you think of a family, you have like 3 or 4 kids, you homeschool them, your brothers and sisters are around each other all the time, right? There's a beauty in that, but then there's also a challenge and a burnout. And then like, you're like overexposed to like your family, right? And sometimes kids want to get out and explore different dynamics, different relationships, right? So I do think there's something to be said for the risk of limiting your ability to socialize with large groups of young people that may not be from your particular slice of life, right? Yeah.
I agree. We're coming to you, Jude, but I wanted to just this is reconstruction.us. It is it's like they say, unapologetically Black education, $10 a session for these classes that you can download and have. Go in and take it out. You can watch the stuff live, I guess. They got just some classes you can join, stuff you can download and kind of do on your own. So it's really cool. And I'm sure that there are other communities that have their own versions. I'm sure there might be, brown versions, Asian versions or whatever, but this is what David was talking about. I just wanted to have it up while you went, Jude. I'll pull it down.
It's cool.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for sharing that. That looks like an amazing resource for sure. So advantages and disadvantages, I don't know. It just depends. I think advantages, you might actually go to school and like your teacher. Your teacher, if you're homeschooled, might actually care about you enough to put the work in to put together strong lessons, rigorous lessons, interesting, exciting lessons, engaging lessons. And it could be a positive experience because you're being taught by someone who cares about your now and your future. So that could be an advantage. And from personal experience, I am navigating this high school experience, just like David was talking about earlier. And it has proven to be quite a headache because it's a damn hit or miss. You got some teachers that are like, right, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you do your part, I'll do mine. They come in prepared, they care, their lessons are rigorous, their standards align, they're beginning with the end in mind. And then you have teachers that's like, I really don't care. I get my paycheck.
Owning that shit in.
I don't give it and so I don't love it. Anyway, so I think an advantage might be that you're connected and you're respected to your community, your teachers, and you might actually enjoy it. I also think to David's point, like the world is your oyster. So we don't have to only look at textbooks. Like what would a world look like where homeschooling takes place like around the dining room table, but also like in Ghana? At the point of no return. Like I think you get to explore so many options for what education is, can be, and can become, with homeschooling. And I think disadvantages, this could be subjective, right? Disadvantages, I think short term, I wouldn't even name socialization because some of these kids are just mean ass kids. Like don't nobody want to talk to you anyway. You are mean. You are a cyber bully. You ain't about it. You say that in the chat, but when I see you outside, you don't say nothing. Like some of y'all are mean. You're just mean. Don't nobody want to talk to you anyway. I feel
like Jubilee is going through some of this stuff concurrently.
That's real though. That's just
I am at
real.
the district level now, right? So at central office, I see all the different emails that come through just because the kid is being mean. Like, why are you throwing paper at her? Why you call him that? Why are you saying like a drag?
And they might like each other, and it's part of it.
I get it, but I'm just saying I could imagine that it's annoying, right? So when they talk about like socialization, there are other places where kids can socialize and maybe actually have a positive experience. Are you on a basketball team, soccer team, crochet club, Black student union? I mean, there are other ways for children to be socialized outside of school. And sometimes because school can be so stressful and the people be so damn mean, the kids go to school and they don't talk to nobody anyway. They wear their all black, their hoodie on their head. They go and take the little notes and go home because they don't even really got no friends in school. And yes, I'm speaking from experience. Anyway. And so long
you did a better Omar than Omar right there. I like that. That's
still enough.
Kiss them Converse, baby. Kiss them Converse.
Long-term disadvantage. I think it's what I always say about this whole K-12 continuum and like, what do we think kids should know as a nation? I don't know if we'll ever, at least find a middle ground where we could believe, because some of y'all want to teach, racism. I don't know. I don't know if we can come to an agreement on what it is, but it would be lovely if we could, as a nation, have standards that we're like, look, it don't matter if you homeschool, if you go to school in the manger, if you go to the school down the block. This is what you need to know by the time you 16. That's all.
Let's do this the right way. Keep going, Jude.
Hell yeah.
I'm serious. I'm really serious. Like if we could just agree on that, because then it doesn't matter. And then when you are taking your SAT and you're taking your AP exams and all that stuff, we're not like, oh damn, like you done missed 2 years because you were homeschooled. You are nowhere near the schools and the kid. But I have a feeling that these homeschool kids will surpass these kids that go to these broke schools every day.
Good Lord. My God.
I think if you go to school with Sister Susie, because Sister Susie care about you and she make you them chocolate chip muffins, you've been to learn today. And when you go to take your SAT, I think you're probably going to outperform those babies that had to talk to the mean ass kids every day. I just say it.
Well, ass kid's gonna get theirs, man.
Oh no!
First off,
I didn't want to leave.
I feel like I'm getting father right now.
Like,
I am kicking
I was
you
gonna
off,
leave
Omar.
a while ago because like
you're supposed
I
to
need
be
to go, but like I am supposed to be gone. But Jude was so on fire. I just wanted to sit and listen. So like that was badass. I'm sorry, everybody. I gotta peace out. Jude, you are amazing.
He was supposed to leave 25 minutes.
You are so
Bye,
unbelievable.
Omar.
I'll talk to you all next week, man. Thank
Love
you.
you,
Oh my
Omar.
God. Well, welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. If you missed this rousing Jubilee, that might have been your finest moment. It was. Where is that? Bring her all the time. Show up 10 minutes late. If that's what you got to do to bring her, then you bring her. You know how Martin Lawrence told Will Smith? Will Smith told Martin Lawrence, that's how you drive. From here on out, that's how you drive.
I hate to finish other people's sentences, but I believe what she was going to say before she ended was these broke ass schools.
Yes, these broke ass schools. I mean, I love our optimistic queen over here, like leaning into it today. You know, there was no both siderism on this one. There was no, because they're all trying and everybody. No, that kid's an asshole. He don't need to be socialized. That sounds like a mother who is going through it with her child and the system and now works there.
Period.
So as I do mine, here's the article, and I do list out some of the what was named as just historically what's been named as some of the disadvantages. So you're right, socialization is definitely one of them. Finances, it could be really financially taxing on people, and then some people said lack of regulation, which for me, I kind of can fight back on that because I don't think the traditional system is regulated at all my damn self. And I mean, that's what people got a lot of beef with. But what I am very optimistic about is this highlighted section where it talks about now en masse, higher education is now altering how they take young people in. So now it'll be easier, because that was the other thing, right? Was that it was hard if you wanted to go to a top tier college, unless you had money and connections. It wasn't always a apples to apples comparison to get you in to like a top tier school, and now you can. Listen, man, this is what I would say. I'm disappointed outside of COVID, and the reason why is because there was all this promise in the sense of this system wasn't working, and we're building new things. What I think the future is really going to be is hybrid. I'm surprised that we're actually back the way that we are now. I thought that once people got a taste of like going to school 3 days and doing 2 days at home, or, snow days are no longer because you can just do stuff from home. And it did not take a full year for us to get right back into the regular program. And I thought that would shake things up. But I do think witty, smart parents, grandparents, guardians are going to start to take advantage of a hybrid model. You know what community does that very well? Asian community, the Chinese American community. I noticed from working in a district where they got the school in a traditional public setting, the way that they got the type of teachers they want, the curriculum. And if you are one of those kids, your ass is going to Chinese school either on Saturday or every day after school, right? They're doing this hybrid model of here's what you need to know in this US context, but here's like your culture. And here's what we do. You might live in the West, but we follow the philosophies of the East. And this is how you need to go about doing it. And I think I would actually say all our groups need to kind of do that. So, I would think that's the biggest advantage is you need to be a double agent. You need to know what everybody else is learning and kind of be proficient in that. Spook Who Sat by the Door is one of my favorite books. It's a very tough book. The concept can be tough to grasp if you're not very disciplined, but you should read it if you haven't. but know what the system is and the empire is trying to do. But you gotta re-steep in who you are and who you want to be, because I've never seen a bad apple. I've never seen bad apples get turned good by one good apple. So you got to really make sure you are operating with that. With that being said, we're going to go into final thoughts. David and me, let's get our final thoughts out the way. And then this Jubilee with the low hair, with her hair not up. Like, we got to let her let the chopper fly. My final thoughts, and I'm coming to you, David, is this is a topic that I do think we need to talk more about. And I do think that should be covered. And I don't think that you have to adapt you don't have to adopt every single part of what it means to be homeschooling. But I do think if you're Democrat and you're worried about the Republicans, if you're Republican and you're worried about the Democrat, if you like, there's a solution. there are ways to think about it. And I think if we find innovative ways to take advantage of these hybrid models or sites like reconstruction.us and the other litany that's out there, I think we can be better positioned. Final thought for you, David, and then Jubilee, take us home.
Yeah, I think your previous comments around the importance of having an education, not necessarily a formal or informal home or out of the home, but that it be culturally affirming. And I just think in this moment that we're living in right now, with everything that this administration is trying to tear down, a lot of the good work and the programs, and just even like the emphasis that government should play a role or shouldn't play a role in leveling the playing field. And part of that is through education, and programs that are equity minded, that see the world through an equity framework, is kind of insane. So I think your comments mean a lot more now than they probably would have meant last year.
Yep.
So I think that's very important. Number one. I think number two, when I think about like a path forward, a couple of simple things. I mean, they're not that simple, but it's very interesting because we are living in this this new like school choice gold rush, right? And I would be much more likely to support providing stipends or tax credits to families to make homeschooling more accessible and sustainable than I would be to hand over government money to a private religious institution, right, in the name of like school choice. So I'll do school choice first, and then if there's anything left over you want to give to religious schools, you can do it. But so I think that's an issue that I think, especially as homeschooling is growing, we'll see what the administration does on that front. I think, what else I write down here? Number two is figuring out a way for students that are in homeschool scenarios to maybe access extracurricular athletic opportunities and or like special education services from the district systems, right? Parents pay taxes, right? So should have some kind of access to that, shouldn't be a barrier. And then number three, not a well like thought out kind of, maybe going back to your example of like how tight some of the Asian American communities are, even thinking back to like the educational community programs of the Black Panthers and the Brown Berets, like what would it look like to kind of formalize networks of homeschool families and homeschool communities to then create kind of a community-based hubs or resources can kind of be pooled, right? So if you live in like East Oakland or the south side of Chicago in a particular area, or in a particular area of Baltimore or San Diego or Los Angeles, in a region, creating a network. So you're still doing homeschooling, but then you actually have access to additional resources, sharing with other homeschooling families. It's kind of like the community learning hub idea that the Oakland Reach was doing, something around that.
Yeah, I call them school boosters. I've written about it, but I agree. And I don't even think you got to be limited geographically. You can have geographic ones. And now with the internet, it's like, I have a book club every week and we are all over the country, right? It's four brothers. So I like that, man. I like that. I think it's some really good ideas in there. Jew, final thoughts, Killer. Let the chopper sing, though, man. Like, don't hold back on our account.
Listen, all I'm trying to say is we need to keep our power and we need to take back our power. And I think, we know how powerful education is, and we need to keep our core no matter which way the wind blows. I think history has shown us time and time again, even in the most recent things that have been happening in our country, that nobody cares. Nobody cares about the blacks and the browns. We care about the blacks and the browns. We care about us. And becoming a parent, whether it is biologically, whether it's through adoption, by any means, like, it is one of the most powerful things you can become, right? It is a key lever. And so for us to position ourselves where we are giving that power away to the local school because they're supposed to be the experts, they're supposed to know, I think that disempowers us. And so if we're really going to strengthen our core and maintain and make sure that we are on track to being bigger, brighter, better, wiser, and more successful as a people, then we need to keep our core. And I think that core starts with homeschooling, right? And I'm not saying only in the traditional sense, like what I was saying earlier. I'm saying to where we keep our power and we teach our babies the foundations of what they need to know, whether they're going the traditional route or not, that we hold on to home base as being the birthplace, right, of these kinds of conversation and where education really begins, homeschool in that sense. And then I also think it's changed from both sides. So I'm not saying that we can't fight for change through these systems. But I think that we need effort on both sides. So we need to be able to change things systemically, but I also think we can change things right in our living room. And so I think that homeschooling is a really a powerful notion. And that's that. Keep our core, stop giving our power away to these different entities, because it starts with us at home. And to your point that you're always talking about, Charles, that nobody's coming to save us and we need to show agency. I think this is a key area where we can show agency. Maybe we're not all trained, right? Like, it made me think about the episode we did on the whole reading with the Fonda and Pinnell. During COVID, when the teachers were on there having the kids going, put, and they were like, wait, what? Like, we can at least do that with ABC Mouse, or we could find some little YouTube, something that can at least do correct spelling and letter sound correspondence. So I'm just saying, for us to just look at our own power and utilize that to strengthen the foundation for our children's future and education.
And with that, and the other thing I would add in, the other thing that we didn't mention, but I think everybody would agree with, and homeschooling doesn't have an age limit. So that, there's continuous education we can begin as adults, as grandparents, or whomever. We don't have to ever stop learning. And I think, that could even add some more juice to this conversation, because there's a lot of people without kids, or their kids are gone, or they're empty nesters. You can contribute to this in a lot of different ways. For Omar, that's Jubilee, that's David, I am Charles, and we will see you all next week, same bad time, same bad station. Until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. This is the last time I'm running this damn commercial, but I got you. Y'all enjoy it one last time. And with that said, peace out.
Today's episode of BS3 Network is brought to you by McDonald's. McDonald's is going to McDonald's and creating a universe for longtime fans of both McDonald's and anime. I love sauce on my McNuggets and can't wait to try the savory chili McDonald's sauce. It's savory, chili, and bold. For decades, across various episodes and genres, McDonald's has shown up in the anime world and most commonly called McDonald's. McDonald's will be bringing the McDonald's world to life with episodic shorts and manga comics. For a limited time, anime fans will have the opportunity to experience their favorite fictional restaurant. You have until March 25th to try the new savory chili McDonald's sauce with your 10-piece chicken nuggets.